But no, we'd like to welcome you guys to the second episode, and today we are going to be talking about a subject that I know I'm a big fan of. I think it's safe to say that Justin here is a big fan of, and that is the caped crusader himself. We're talking about Batman. Now, for those of you who may not know who Batman is, in 1939, thanks to writer Bill Finger and artist Bob Kane, Batman was created and debuted in Detective Comics number 27 in May of 1939. And ever since then, he has been in a litany of movies, books, shows, video games, anything you can think of, Batman has been associated with. And that's who we're going to talk about today. So, to kind of get us started, Justin, what would you say is something that kind of made you a fan of Batman?
Batman's such a ubiquitous superhero, right? And I mean, that goes back to he was made a long time ago, right? Yep. So he's someone that survived comic books from like a very early date. So not many of them have that option. I think for me, I became a fan of it probably watching Justice League on TV when I was younger. The original cartoon, Justice League, was just fantastic, and I think as a kid it had this like really mature storytelling, and you can kind of tell that. But I'd say Justice League and Batman Beyond were probably the two that I got on with the most. The original Batman cartoon, I think I was a little too old for that when it first came out, but Kevin Conroy is that voice. We'll get to that later on.
Yeah, we'll get to that later on.
I think that's where it started with me. How did you become a fan of Batman, Nick?
Honestly, kind of like you, man. When I was younger, the cartoon was like the first thing I saw was the Batman animated series, and it was different than a lot of the cartoons that I watched at that time. You know, at that point in time when you're that young, it's like Blue's Clues and Bear in the Big Blue House, you know, all these different shows. Man, that was a throwback. But no, seeing Batman and just kind of like watching him, you know, just dish out all this justice was so cool. Like the way they animated him was so awesome.
I think what was amazing about that series, like going back and looking at the Batman the Animated Series, seeing like the art style and stuff, it was like similar to how people talk about movies now and how they construct these worlds. You know, they had the stark contrast of it being a modern day superhero cartoon, but they made sure that all of the architecture, all of the cars had this like gothic, giant, dark theme to it. And you combine it with everything that's going on, and it's just incredible. I mean, the sky was basically red.
It was.
If it wasn't dark outside. It was just very stylish. And I know it sounds strange calling a cartoon stylish, but it really was. And so, like, I think that really kind of cemented it as like, oh yeah, this is kind of like a big deal, you know? I loved a lot of superheroes as a kid, but that's what put Batman as a fan for me. It's just that show.
I was about to say, I watched over Corona when we were all in the house. The creators of the show actually did a behind-the-scenes thing, and one of the things that they really talked about, Bruce Timm, who was like the head artist, he talked about the Art Ditko style.
Did you say his name was Bruce Timm?
Yes.
So
Bruce
his first
Timm
name Bruce. There's a Robin by the name of Tim Drake. Oh, so it's two M's.
It's two M's. It's two M's, not
it's
one.
Like, oh my gosh, the coincidence.
I got happy too when I first saw his name. I was like, dude. But no, he said it was very much influenced by like the Art Ditko cartoons. For those of you who don't know Art Ditko, like that type of style, definitely look into it. It is very unique, very beautiful style. There were quite a few cartoons even back in the day that were created in that style. So they kind of brought that in and also mixed it in with a few modern twists. And, you know, they still had like cell phones and like blasters and helicopters and all, you know, stuff that they didn't have particularly back in during the time period Batman was created. So yeah, it's a beautiful when you see just how much work and passion they put into that.
I think and I think it really elevates, you know, it's funny seeing something like that so early. As we've grown up, we've gotten to see so many of like Marvel movies, for example, and the rise of them being taken very, very seriously. And I think Batman the Animated Series as a start, it was one of those ones that at first glance you might be not taking it seriously, but truly I think it probably helped harken in you know, the elevation of those as an art form, or as one that at least that people look at and are like, oh my gosh, I've got to see that.
Definitely. And so with that, like I said, it kind of started in a comic, and ever since then he's had a litany of different stories. So what would you, Justin, say is your favorite Batman story?
I would have to say, and we had talked about this a little bit beforehand during the sound check, I really think The Dark Knight Returns. And if you don't know which one that is, it's older, and you can probably recognize it because you have this like really cool cover. It's like a bolt of lightning striking in the background, and you've got the silhouette of Batman like flying through the air. And it sounds a little silly, I guess, when I describe it like that, but it looks really cool. And I really liked it because it brought so much new to the story. So I don't think it's considered like canon because it's one where Batman's older. He had been retired from being Batman, and he comes out of retirement and gets a new Robin, has a final showdown with the Joker, has a showdown with Superman.
Yeah, that.
And that actually inspired Batman v Superman.
Yep.
They pretty much stole that not stole. It was inspired by that original scene, but
the comic book did it better.
Yeah, I think the reason I love it so much is because it was able to distill in one controlled story, so it's not connected to anything else. You're able to see a lot of Batman's values. You're able to see what's important to him, what's not important to him, what he's capable of, what he's not capable of. And overall, I think that's one of, the things that has made Batman endure is, the spirit of what he does, right? And we could get into probably a whole other talk here talking about like the philosophy of Batman. But I really think that story is my favorite. It's called The Dark Knight Returns. And I mean, it's incredible. It really is a good little bite-sized chunk of everything that makes Batman fantastic.
Totally. I think that my personal favorite Batman story, I know, give me that drum. My personal favorite would have to be Death in the Family. Death in the Family was a story that was told back in the 80s, again. And it was focusing on Jason Todd, who was the second Robin that Batman had. And in that period, everybody hated Jason Todd as a Robin. It was universally known that was the most hated Robin because he was just, the way he was written, he was just so cocky and brash and wouldn't listen and just annoying how he was written, And so they actually did it where he gets captured by Joker and his fate is left in the hands of the people. Like, they legitimately, we were talking about that too before we filmed.
They had like a panel at the end of one of those comics, and they were like allowing people to call in and make a vote on this.
Yeah, they had a call number, like a hotline number that you could call, and you could decide, does he survive kidnapping or does he not? And across the board, he did not make it through. Spoiler alert. But that was the thing. And to me, that was crazy because, as we're not making fun of Marvel. Let me just put that out there. We love Marvel. We're not just hating on Marvel. But in similarity, Marvel does a lot of fan service for people. You think about Endgame. From 2008 to 2018, Marvel had built this universe, given us Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, built this whole world. And then in Endgame, it all culminates. That fan service culminates because you get to see all the heroes that I know for myself, I grew up with from, like I said, 2008 to 2018. All of them come together, big movie, last battle, boom. It's a beautiful thing. And that was what I thought was done. The DC did first, basically, was they gave, they had these characters that they welcomed. Jason Todd at this point was welcomed. They could tell his reception wasn't going well. So then they said, okay, fans, you tell us what to do with him. And they created for both outcomes. So they had a story prepared if people said, let him live. And they had a story for vice versa. And that to me was just really, really appealing to me, to see them be willing to take that risk and really be willing to commit to whatever decision was made by the people.
And that was something that, they've expanded on since then. So someone by the name of Dick Grayson was the first Robin. He kind of grew up, ended up kind of clashing a little bit with Batman, became Nightwing based on a suggestion from Superman. I believe Nightwing is a Kryptonian bird, which is what a Kryptonian vigilante used. Anyways, this is probably neither here nor there. Then Tim Drake came along, right? After I'm so sorry, Jason Todd came along. Then Tim Drake, then Damian Wayne. But now you have what's colloquially known as the Bat Family, right? And what you're able to see is this little microcosm of all of these characters. And I think that's what we're getting at with Death in the Family. They were kind of looking at their own collection of characters and putting them on the chopping block. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what happens with Jason Todd later on?
Yeah, so this again, Death in the Family is well, that's another reason why it's so special, because you think it would just leave off at that one story, but they actually took their time to come around and boom, bring him right back
years later. And so the idea is they aren't just with Death in the Family, taking out a character. I would imagine at some level they had an idea of the Bat Family and the idea of, okay, we've got someone we can plug in here.
Oh man, but no. So after the events of Death in the Family, that some time has passed, and it kind of comes around that Batman starts dealing with this mysterious vigilante, basically, who's not abiding by his rules, because Batman doesn't kill. That's his thing. He does not kill. That's his whole thing. He believes in reformation, giving people a second chance, which I think is an endearing quality of his. So he's dealing with this. Him and Nightwing, they're trying to figure out who it is. A gentleman by the name of Red Hood. Now, Red Hood has made a significant name for himself at this point in time. Your favorite mobster's mobster was afraid of Jason Todd at this point. So Red Hood goes around, does all this, and come to find out, it was Jason Todd. Now, I'm not going to tell you how it turned out that way. You're going to have to read that one or watch it for yourself.
I was about to say, they have so
you have that material, which we will focus more on after the end of the show, give you some things that you could take a look at should you be so interested. Now, another thing with Batman is defined by his villains, as it was put by one of his creators.
Right.
Batman's defined by his rogues gallery. Yeah. So, who would you say out of his entire rogues gallery is your favorite villain?
I think this is going to make me really basic. But, I mean, it's got to be the Joker.
Oh, totally.
And I think it's got to be the Joker because of Batman as a hero. And, I mean, we couldn't help but talk about it, even in just introducing some of this, the things that Batman stands for, this idea that as a character he's very rigid, has a bunch of things that he brings to the table, both physically, but also with regards to, what he stands for, right? And so I really am a super big nerd for all things like that. That's why I could talk about this stuff all day.
Oh, yeah, man.
And so the idea is that the Joker is someone who is just as showing up and upfront and putting out there his own views or lack thereof. I think The Dark Knight, it's just The Dark Knight, examines a little bit of that dynamic, and I really think it's one of the most amazing things in comics. Now, I do like other Batman villains, to be very clear.
But no, this is about your favorite, though. That's your favorite.
I think that would be my favorite. And it's less about, I would say, the classic Joker, even though I enjoy that a lot. But current writers who lean into that concept of Joker being the opposite of Batman, that's what I enjoy the most. I really like in heroes and with graphic novels, these movies, I love things that are complex and I love things that are deep, and I want it to really grab me. And what better way to do that with a movie than to have someone as off the wall as Joker? It's really interesting. What's your favorite?
I was about to say, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to do two. Story-wise, Joker is my favorite. Because, I don't know, maybe, like you said, you're a nerd about it like I am. Joker is really the only person that has pushed Batman to that place.
Right.
A place he doesn't like to go, but Joker has pushed him to that. And he doesn't do it, all up front. It's like steps that he goes through to, mess with him. Because, even if you look at the Dark Knight movie, you see that there are so many different things that happen leading up to that final confrontation.
So it's how he goes about. It's how he goes about challenging Batman.
Yes. Joker, I think, out of all of his Batman's rogue gallery, is the only one to challenge Batman on every front.
That's fair.
Every front, and it's all in the name of, to Joker, he's trying to prove that anybody can be me. Like, literally, like, anybody can take that turn. That one bad day can turn the most clean-cut, good doer a step away from being me. And when you think about that, that's... And I think, too, and that was another reason I was going to say story-wise he's a good one, because Joker himself has even said, if I'm going to have a backstory, I'd rather it be viewer's choice. So he doesn't have a definitive origin. Like, Batman's origin, lost his parents, became this symbol of justice and hope, has this moral code. Superman, dying place. They have established origins. Joker's does not.
Right.
Like, his could literally string off into this reality, that reality, this multiverse. It's wide open. And writers and artists have taken that concept and, like you said, have just full speed dead ahead.
So here's the big question. Who's your other favorite Batman? Didn't know we could pick multiple.
Oh yeah. I said I was cheating. Villain-wise, I have to say Mr. Freeze.
Mr. Freeze. Okay, that's fair.
And I'm basing that off of the Heart of Ice episode from the OG Batman cartoon. For those of you, let me say that, for those of you who haven't gotten a chance to see the original Batman cartoon, go check it out. It's on iTunes. You can get it on YouTube. It's a really good show. But in that one, Dr. Freeze, at that time, Victor, he's losing his wife to cancer. She's dying. And so he wants to try to save her, so he freezes her. And in order to keep her alive, basically, he commits all these crimes of stealing diamonds, which help power the freezing machine that's helping keep her alive.
Right.
And you're going through all of this, and you actually start feeling bad for him, because all the man wants to do is save his wife, like the love of his life. And I think even at the end of that episode, I think even Batman is kind of like sympathetic. Like, he still has to stop him, because he's doing the bad things in the right, doing bad things for what he views as the right motive. But even Batman's like, all this man wants to do is just save his wife. Who wouldn't?
And I think like that goes to where it's like we like, and I mean, I say we, some people might not like this, but I'd say on the whole, this is what separates, the good from the bad with regards to these movies, graphic novels. We like characters that subvert expectations. And this concept of this big, bold guy who can go around freezing everything, the idea that he's actually doing that for a good cause, I think that's something that subverts the expectations of who is standing against Batman. I think in a lot of ways that challenges Batman in what he's doing, right? This idea where he does need to stop the bad guy.
Yeah.
But ultimately, if like Mr. Freeze rolled up and was like, hey, Batman, can you help me out? He would probably have instantly ran to do that.
Totally.
And so it's one of those things where it's like, when you blend all of that together, seeing how these characters react to one another, and seeing particularly how Batman does in that case is really amazing. So that was a good choice.
Yeah, man. And I think, too, no matter who we were to pick out of his entire gallery of bad guys, each one attacks a different sense of Batman. One attacks his mind, other attacks his heart, one attacks like his emotional state, and that. So he's challenged by each one, and I think he, in a weird way, has grown from each one.
I guess that leads to a good, very pertinent next question, though. I want to ask you this one first.
Okay.
So there have been a lot of different portrayals of Batman. There have been movies, lots of comics, obviously. A lot of different cartoons. There have been a lot of portrayals of Batman. Which Batman is your favorite?
Ooh, I've been thinking about this for weeks, man. It's so hard to pick because a lot of them are good for different reasons. Also, let us know in the comments who your favorite Batman actor is, because I'm interested to see who everybody else is thinking about too. But I have to say for myself, the person that gave Batman the most, that I feel like was the most realistic portrayal, Robert Pattinson.
Yeah.
Basing that on the fact of the Batman movie really felt like I was watching it straight out of a comic.
His performance in the Batman is, and I think there's a little bit of bias when I think of what my favorite Batman is to the most recent one, right? And I guess that's not always the case. If the Batman hadn't come out yet and we were talking about Batman v Superman, I would still be going back to the earlier ones.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I was planning on saying Robert Pat as my favorite. Although I didn't know we could cheat, so I'm going to throw in another one too. We can keep talking about Robert Pat for now, but I mean, you've got a Batman who you've had very many different portrayals of this, and some of them you have like, you know, the really rich, like outside of the costume, portraying that he's this like rich billionaire and like, you know, and then
man about town sort of thing.
Right, and then you have other portrayals where it's kind of like Robert Pattinson's in the Batman, where where he's very much still shell shocked. He's very much this shell of a man, and really you could probably say that he's more of himself when he's in the bat suit. I think my favorite outside of Robert Pattinson would have to be Kevin Conroy. His portrayal in the animated series, and it's tough because there is something to seeing a live action, someone is physically dressed up in this bat suit and very seriously tackling the kinds of things that we've been talking about so far. But Kevin Conroy in the animated series, his voice and the portrayal of it, what he does with that voice, the kind of presence that he commands, you know, you have someone that you're almost kind of like genuinely scared of. And to have that contrast with the fact that also in that portrayal of Batman, he is extremely, extremely moral. You know, probably one of the most ethical Batmans that there are. And so to have someone who's able to command that kind of presence, but also stand up in just the right ways, that voice is amazing. And you see that in not just the animated series, but Kevin Conroy has gone on to do Batman for multiple video games. I'm sure there have been other cartoons.
He even did a live action portrayal of Bruce Wayne. CW had like this big crossover event, and he got to do I think I remember. He was Nightfall, or no, not Nightfall, Kingdom Come version.
Interesting.
Batman. It really was. It was weird, and it was weird seeing him IRL because like, in animation, you just hear like the passion and the emotion that he puts into both Bruce and Batman. But to see him do it, like looking at him, like I was like, man, like that took me a while to process because it was still such a good performance, but just the delivery of it was different.
Yeah.
But it still had that same result.
I think truly, if we could move towards, if there was like an archetype of Batman, I think Kevin Conroy's Batman would be such a perfect little example. I don't think there's any Batman story that you couldn't throw Kevin Conroy's Batman into and he wouldn't be successful.
He wouldn't be successful.
However, I will say, you know, having Robert Pattinson as Batman is still my favorite right now. But ideally, I hope with the arc of those movies, if they do another one, I would love to see the arc of that be them achieving the same kind of Batman that Kevin Conroy did.
Oh, totally.
So this idea that in the Batman, you know, he was kind of this like shell of a man outside of it. If they brought back, you know, the whole billionaire, you know, playboy type activities, and then he went forward and still went out at night and became that commanding presence in the Batman. And then he also is able to show like the hope that he shows at the end of the movie.
Of course.
That would be the perfect Batman.
Now, but that leads us, we talked about the main man, but he also, like we said, he has a bad family. And as we discussed, he's got a Robin.
If you ask me,
who's your favorite Robin?
If I liked Batman or Robin better, I would have always probably would have said Robin, one of the Robins.
A lot of people would have.
And I think it's because I think like Batman is this great, big, magnificent figure, and I think Robin's like kind of our peek in the door, right? Yep. It's someone who hasn't been exposed to all of that, not nearly as intense, way more fun at parties, and the idea is that, you know, Robin is meant to be more relatable, right? So I think that's really important. Would you like to go first, saying who your favorite?
I was about to say, I've made you go first. I feel bad. I'll try going first on this one. I think for me, out of all of the Robins, Jason Todd's great. His story is, I don't know, out of all of them, his story is the best, though. And then I think, you know, Dick Grayson's nice because, you know, Dick was, you know, him and Batman kind of had that bond of both losing their parents. Dick was a circus performer with his parents, and his parents and family were sadly murdered. So Batman took him in, made him Robin, and then became Nightwing. So that's a beautiful dynamic there. And plus, he was a Robin that grew up and was kind of like, yo, I can't be in your shadow anymore. Like, I got to do my own thing. But
and then he came back, and when Batman was gone for a little while,
Batman
he was
too.
Batman.
And I want to say, wasn't he one of like the only Robins? Or no, I think Tim Drake was Batman for a bit, wasn't he?
I don't think so. I think at the same time that Dick Grayson took over as Batman, Tim Drake was Red Robin. And if I remember correctly, he was running around trying to find Batman.
Trying to find Batman, and that left Dick to be the Batman we know. But Jason was just a kid that literally got a bad rep.
I mean, he was stealing the wheels off the
he was stealing wheels off the Batmobile, which is a super gutsy move to do in the first place. But even when he becomes Red Hood, and this was a powerful scene for me, after Batman figures out that Jason Todd was Red Hood, he meets him at this abandoned building. He's like, pulls out the Joker out of a closet. And he's like, if this man would have hurt you in any shape, form, or fashion, I would have crossed over the earth and beyond to make sure he paid. And he looks at Batman and he's like, I'm giving you your chance. Make him pay for what he did to me.
I'm gonna have to go watch this.
And
after work today.
that to me was a powerful scene, because he in his heart he knew Batman wouldn't do it, but to me that was him basically saying, how much do you love me?
And
did you ever love me? Basically.
Like the father-son dynamic there too, and there's a father-son dynamic in basically with a lot of the Robins, because Batman's a mentor. But like in that moment, I mean, there's a lot of this person is looking at Bruce with this expectation of like, if you cared, this is what you do, and naturally Batman doesn't do it. But that's such a powerful dynamic. I mean, that's so real and raw, and so yeah.
And even that little interaction that they had, because he tells him, he's like, either you do it or I will, but do it. And Batman's like, you don't think there are times that I want to? You don't think that I don't have moments? He's like, after all the stuff I've seen over the years of him do, that I don't want to. He's like, but I don't, because if I do, I'd be no better than him.
And I think that's what's so great about those stories and those characters, is they're taking this big lofty ideal that Batman lives up to, but he doesn't spend a lot of time talking about it unless it's like an intro comic or something like that. So to be put in those situations and to be saying the same things that we might be thinking, reading it
out loud,
and then having Bruce have to confront those and defend them, I think when it's done well, it's significant. I think Jason Todd was the perfect one for that.
And I like to just how, like I said, Jason knew, but at that moment Jason reverted back to a kid. He was like, basically, Dad, do you love me? This man wronged me. He took me away from you. Years we could have had, and he took me away, and you didn't basically change your morals.
It's like, I wish I could see in that film and comic and all of that, I wish I could see like a day later where Batman's reflecting on those decisions he had to make, right? And those lines that he stood behind. I would love to hear his internal dialogue specifically breaking down, this is why I don't do this. I know that sounds very technical,
reflecting over his morals,
but
and why
this
he
idea
does
that
it.
if this person does make such grand decisions, right, to be able to have some insight, into how they look at that, I think that'd be great. And they do that a lot in the comics, but
and I like too how up to Under the Red Hood, to me anyway, it felt like what happened to Jason defined Batman a lot. Like he became a lot more protective of his Robins after what happened to Jason,
and even questioned whether he should have one.
Even he should have
which
one.
Is, I think, a good question. I mean, they're kids.
They're kids that he's turning into him, and now he's like, maybe this ain't a good idea.
Yeah.
But when he's confronted with that in Under the Red Hood, then it's like, I think for both of them it was cathartic, because Batman got that, okay, he's not gone, he's not the same, but he's, I can probably help him. But then for Jason too, he actually got to see that, man, Batman did care about me, he didn't forget me.
And you see that arc with Jason Todd, how he develops as the Red Hood, as his own character, moving forward through some of the stories. I think for me, and I guess I'm going to bring it around to Tim Drake, because we haven't talked much about Tim Drake. We don't talk much.
Tim's great, okay? Don't get me wrong. Tim Drake is a great
Tim Drake is my favorite Robin. And the thing that's tricky about him, he's the only one who wanted to be Robin without having basically being caught up in
all
any
those extra
circumstances.
steps, yeah.
In most stories, because they've had to retell it and retcon it a couple times, but I think in most of them, Tim Drake seeks out Batman, deduces his identity, and wants in. And Tim Drake has also been pretty consistently referred to as being probably the best analytical mind of all of the Robins. A lot of the comics, Batman is very much a detective. And so Tim Drake, I think, emulates that the best. I think from an ethics perspective, he's a little bit more thoughtful. Nightwing's an incredible character, so Dick Grayson as Nightwing is incredible. But to me, if we're talking Robins, I think Tim Drake is the one who I think developed the most ownership over the spot and what it means to be one. So there's a time where Batman disappears. Tim Drake gets a little bit more of a independent costume, being called the Red Robin, and goes around. Ra's al Ghul meets him, calls Tim Drake detective, which is normally something only Batman gets referred to as. So as a sign of respect, it was a big deal. But if we're thinking about, like, you know, what Batman is and then what Robin is, they're normally very distinguished roles. But for Tim Drake, he very much is looking at that and becoming basically a better Bruce Wayne. A Bruce Wayne that is not drawing from things like hurt or pain or these experiences, and instead is choosing to stand for them on his own accord. I think that's very powerful. I think it's very compelling. Absolutely.
You know, we're kind of getting to our time, but I guess my final question, all of this, Batman being great, one of my favorite fictional characters, what does Batman mean to Justin?
I think Batman, to take the quote from the movie, right? He's vengeance, right?
I am vengeance.
That sounds so strange to say out loud, but you know, we consume a lot of media involving revenge stories or revolving justice, right? So amongst all of that, right, a very oversaturated world, what is Batman? I think Batman means to me, I think he means a lot to me. I think the idea that he as a human, you know, doesn't have superpowers, all of his stuff that he has worked for himself, you know, obviously he was born into a very wealthy family, but he's chosen to do so many things on his own accord, building them up for himself to take care of others. I think that intelligence that he brings to the table is extremely powerful. His ability to lead. And so I guess like there's a bit of a like role modelness to that, you know, not like directly I'd say, but to aspire to be like someone, right? And I think personally, you know, I would go less on the side of the whole combative vengeance thing, right? I'm not going to be standing on the top of the library in my bat costume, but beating people up. But the idea is that, you know, this is someone who is capable, who is disciplined, who is moral, and who is not going to sit something out, you know. If there's someone that needs help, they'll help. I think that means a lot. I could probably say the same thing about a lot of heroes, but not nearly to the same extent, with the same kind of complexity, maybe even facing the same trials as Batman does.
Yeah, for myself, you know, and just thinking like of what you said, like, this is a man who, again, has watched horrible atrocities. Like, go back to The Dark Knight. Dark Knight is a great movie. I'm just putting that out there. One of my top, like, 5. But here it is. Joker blew up this hospital. He, you know, was just taking out people left and right, staging this coup, this robbery. Like, Batman, which witnessed all of this, he lost the woman he loved because the Joker was playing basically who would you rather save?
Like a game.
Like a game. And through all that, the only thing he could really do was to stick to his guns. Now, he had his moments of grief. He had his, you know, there's a really powerful scene with him and Alfred where Batman's sitting in his chair and there's like this blue light hitting him. And he's just reflecting. He was like, you know, I was going to give this up for her. Like, I was going to let this go. And that's all over. And that scene, just the somberness of it, of him realizing that, but at the same time not dropping the ball with what he knew was the right thing to do.
The idea of a hero, you know, standing strong, choosing to do the right thing even when it hurts. that's a theme across a lot of different superhero based content. But
I think that's even like just a human thing.
Yeah.
There's so many things that, you know, we know what the right thing to do should be. We know what we should do. We know how it should be done. But there's just there's something in us that like we have to fight, we have to combat, because we know that that's not the right thing to do. And I think Batman being able to do that and the compassion that he has, I really hate, one of the biggest things that I don't like about anything that Batman's been in media-wise is they forget to capture that, yes, he's this brooding hero who fights for justice and whatever. He's still a man. He still cares. There's a scene in the Justice League, I can't remember if it was Unlimited or the original, but there's this little girl who she's gonna die.
Yeah, this was Justice League Unlimited.
It was Unlimited. Yeah, she was gonna die, and she's sitting on the swing, and she's like, "Will you stay with me?" And
she's
he's
basically
like,
destroying the city due to her powers going out of control. Batman's able to get close to her, talk with her. You were saying that.
Yeah,
she basically asks him to just sit with him while she's about to pass.
Yeah, and he does. He grabs her hand and he sits there. And to me, that I was like, why don't they show more of that side of him?
And that matches with the ending of the Batman. You know, with going towards this idea of like hope being just as important as justice. I think that's a really important thing. What does Batman mean to you? He means a lot for the decisions that he makes, choosing to do the right thing.
But no, we're super happy that you guys could be here with us, man. We really got the chance to talk about, like I said, one of my favorite fictional heroes in literature. So that was really nice to be able to do it with all of you, and do it with my main man Justin. I appreciate it. Now, I told you at the end of this we were going to let you know some different materials that you could come on down here to the McCracken County Public Library and look at. And we'd be here all day if I named all of the things we have, but we have a litany of books, movies, games for different consoles, PlayStation 3, Xbox One, that sort of thing. So we encourage you to come on down. You can talk to Mr. Justin or talk to myself, and we will be happy to help you find what you're looking for. So yeah, if you could join us next time, episode 3. We'll be coming at you with that pretty soon. And of course, you know, if you want to know anything about the library or what we got going on, head on over to www.mclib.net. Again, that's www.mclib.net. Until next time, people, I'm Nick, and this is Justin, and we'll see you when we see you.